Thanks for listening to the Clive Barker Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the imagination of Clive Barker. This is episode 181, where we finally come back to the Marvel epic Hellraiser comics, books 14, 15, and 16. 16 sort of, I say, because unfortunately I was tired and I read the 17 instead of 16, which we find out, we figure it out during the course of the episode. But anyway, this episode is also sponsored by Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination shop is dedicated to benefiting the arts and medicine program at Texas Children's Cancer Center. Up to 50% of the proceeds will support the program where artist Don Bertram volunteers monthly. Please join us in donating to the program at Texas Children's Cancer Center. There's a link in the show notes and on the main website at clivebarkercast.com that will take you where you need to go to get one of his prints or art books and help out this wonderful program. So that's Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. All right, so all that being said, here we go with episode 181, Marvel Hellraiser Part 5, covering books 14, 15, and 16 of the Marvel Hellraiser run from the 90s. Thanks for joining us. This is episode 181 of the Clive Barker Podcast, Marvel Hellraiser Part 5. So we're talking about the Marvel Epic Hellraiser comics, book 14, 15, and 16 in this one.
Wow, yes. And as usual, we got Ryan.
Hey.
And Rob.
Oh, hey guys.
And myself, Jose. So yes, issue 14. It's got a beautiful cover by Jim Sherman, and it's titled "Sex, Lies, and Holy War," which is, of course, an allusion to the movie "Sex, Lies, and Videotape" from Steven Soderbergh from 1989. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, I have to say that I was starting to get a little disappointed with we'll talk about the Devil's Brigade, but I was starting to get a little disappointed with the direction of the Devil's Brigade. It seemed like it was kind of turning into an uncontrollable mess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's on issue like 16 or something that Dan Chichester mentions some of the adjectives that would characterize the story were epic, pointless, interconnected, disjointed, unifying, and out of control. Yeah. and I kind of agree with that. So, but it's nice to see how they managed to kind of pull things together a bit in these last three issues, because these last three issues have Devil's Brigade Part 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, along with a finale. So they really kind of tied everything together with these last three issues.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it starts out these books 14 and 15, actually in 16, all start out. They'll have one one-off story, and then the rest of them are part of an interconnected, thing. And so in book 14, we start out with a story called Later, which is a really creepy story, written by C.J. Henderson and Vincent Cecolini? And
Chicolini.
And art by Colleen Doran, we've seen her art in other stories so far.
Yes, the one about the girl and her diary and how she gets obsessed with this boy and he gives her a lament configuration. Yes. That was an interesting one. I just want to mention before that the opening pinup in this comic book is by an artist named Bartis. And it's pretty archetypal of the Hellraiser story, right? I mean, it's a man solving a lament. Yeah. Like someone devoted and obsessed, and he gets to a different place in his mind and body and achieves illumination in the form of physical torture. All it takes is 9 panels, and I think this illustration, I wouldn't call it really a pinup. It's more like a lesson in sequential art. It's really good.
I agree with that.
It's also connected to the last illustration in this comic book of a man being visited by a Cenobite. So sometimes it makes me wonder if these things were just ideas or pitches for stories that never got made. Yeah. But I really like this one. I would love to have this one as a poster. It's really cool. But yeah, Later is a story about a rapist who violates and intimidates his victims and tries to outwit the Cenobites. right?
Yeah, and so this character, he jumps out at people and attacks them, but the real thing that he does is kind of a mental torture of saying, like, well, he goes through their wallets or whatever, and he's like, well, now I know where you live, and you're not ready for me yet, but I'll come back for you later when you're ready. And he drives them crazy, and
most of them kill themselves.
Yeah, and he does follow them home, and I don't know if he actually rapes them or just the idea or the anticipation of it is enough to drive them crazy and they kill themselves.
He definitely assaults them, and he kind of makes their darkest nightmares feel like they're about to come true, at least. And so yeah, it's funny because here in the beginning you can see that there's a few Cenobites that have appeared in other stories. Like there's one called the Master. He's got those two like horn-like things coming out of his head. Kind of looks like Galactus, if Galactus was a Cenobite.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can see Abigor as well. And there's one guy, the guy with those strings coming out of the headband that he's got. He was one of the Cenobites from Songs of Metal and Flesh, written by Peter Atkins. So it's funny to see them bring back other Cenobites from other stories.
Yeah. I like that.
So,
I like when you call it bringing the universe together. That's keeping characters popping up in cameos. I like
connecting stories together. Yeah. So this guy doesn't really have a name, right? I mean, he just, like Ryan was saying, what he does, and he kind of revels in the pain of his victims. And he says that he pinned their wings to his wall. He takes pictures of them. He sends them like letters with blank pages just to let them know that, oh, I'm still here, I'm watching. And he thinks that makes him somehow worthy of becoming a Cenobite, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just...
And then, of course, the sort of hellish, ironic twist at the end is that when he gets caught, when he gets taken away by the Cenobites, he's like, okay, well, after all the stuff I do, I know you're going to take me. And they're like, maybe later.
Not right now.
Yeah, because they tell him that he missed the point. Yeah.
Well, and also the idea being that they're doing to him what he did to all those other people, making them, torturing him forever and making them, and keeping him in anticipation.
Yeah, because he's pretty ballsy. He's totally chained, and he's got hooks coming out of his body, and is like pushed up against this pillar of nails, and he's like, okay, I'm ready for my reward. And they're like, I think we have to break you a little bit before anything happens, so maybe later. Yeah. So the story ends with them being shredded into pieces, and so I like that story. Yeah. I like it. It's like, no, what you do is not enough. It's not really what we do. So if you want to become one of us, you're probably going to have to learn a few lessons.
And then we have a weird pinup with some eggs and a guy with a pyramid. I don't know.
That's strange.
Yeah.
I think this pinup appears also in one of the books of the Damned, the Revelations of Johnny John. I think that's from that one as well.
Oh, okay.
But they reuse some pinups in those things, so I don't know. It is a very strange looking one. It kind of reminds me of like an allusion to the Illuminati, maybe, because there's like a triangle. But anyway, so that's one of those one-off pinups that I don't really know what to talk about.
Yeah.
Right.
So because it's so strange.
Yeah.
And off the wall.
And then we move into the Devil's Brigade Part 13, Breakdown in Red, written by Ron Wolf, and artist is Kieran Dwyer. So I like the art in this, but this is one of those ones that was frustrating because it seems like the story sort of lost its way, and Face was just creating havoc and wasn't really doing what he was supposed to do. And and then the Cenobites come in and give him a hard time about it, and it's kind of how I feel about the story too. It's like this story wasn't going the way it was supposed to either.
No. So I kind of summed up the story a little bit, and I'll just go through it. So we left the last chapter of Leo Schabel's story as he killed Lisa Ann by his own hand, right? He had confessed to her that he had murdered his own sister when he was a kid, and then he killed her to keep her silent. So now we open to the story. He's like like still standing in front of her corpse in this abandoned theater, and he's on the verge of a psychotic breakdown, which is the opposite of what Leviathan wanted. He wanted Leo to remain stable and kind of hone the homeless into an ordered faction, because hunger, fear, anguish were seen as chaotic. So in the meantime, Face is just looking for and feeding drama of epic proportions, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of lost in the game. Like Flagellum appears to threaten him and says, "This is not what we want. You know, you have to keep Leo stable so he can like do his what was it called? Like the Leo's Havens, I think."
Yeah. Yeah, his shelters.
Yeah. So, but Face says, "Okay, I need to save the third act of the story." And so what he does is really, really crazy. So he reanimates Lisa's body, and Leo just kind of starts losing it. He kind of rips her face off, and then he sees that Face's face is underneath her, and it's unclear whether this is actually happening or if it's just like inside Leo's mind, right?
Yeah.
So he
goes
Leo's
insane.
faced. Yeah. So Leo is faced with the truth that he's an evil man. He's a monster.
Yeah.
And whereas the good man can try fighting against the cruel world, but doesn't really make much of a difference, which I kind of disagree. They say that the evil man can really make a difference and prevent anyone from living in a cruel world by killing them. So he goes mad, leaves the theater, and kills the first homeless man he sees asking for help, which is, just the absolute opposite of what Leviathan wanted.
Yeah.
So Flagellum comes over to chide Face, and he's willing to admit he didn't do what was expected, but he refuses to admit failure because he put on a heck of a show.
Yeah.
I think that it's too hard to make all these interconnected stories and then keep changing up the writers all the time.
Yeah. Well, that's where the editor comes in. The editor has to tell all the artists and writers what the plan is, I guess.
Exactly.
So yeah.
I don't know. I mean, this one, and it's like in the beginning, Leo Shable is like he can't believe that he killed her, or he it's almost like he was mind controlled or something. So then but at the end of the last story with him, it seemed like he just flipped and
Yes.
So I don't know.
Well,
this is hard to understand.
Well, his emotions were definitely being manipulated by Face. Face was kind of controlling Lisa Ann from the inside, and there's one point in the previous chapter where Lisa Ann kind of breaks out and says something about being controlled and Face and whatever. I think I remember something like that.
And then when he killed her, she's like, "Oh, now I'm finally free."
Right. But I love the part where Flagellum appears, and for those who aren't familiar with the character or haven't read a lot of these books, Flagellum is this Cenobite, a female Cenobite that lives within Leviathan's temple, I think. And so what she does is she sleeps most of the time and dreams. If everything's okay, then fine. If Leviathan needs to talk to someone, then she shows up and she is possessed by Leviathan and speaks. Leviathan speaks through her using his voice. So... yeah,
it reminds me of the mouth of Sauron.
Yeah, or Metatron, the voice of God.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what's really nice is that she has this. Well, of course, she's called Flagellum because she self-flagellates, and she has this thorn whip.
Yeah.
And when she appears to chide Face, the way she disappears is like she shreds herself to bits with the whip, and she kind of flies away in like this blood shower thing. So I thought that was
ribbons of flesh and stuff.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. I really like the way that this artist a-Kieran Dwyer depicts her. Yeah. But you're right, it's kind of a wacky story.
I was really lost because I've not read the last few issues, so I really didn't know what was kind of going on. But I really liked the art.
The story is thin, also. I mean, the idea that a guy making a bunch of homeless shelters is going to fight chaos, and help hell somehow, that's hard to swallow.
Yeah, it's hard to swallow, especially because on the other sideline story, the one that takes place in that country that's going through apartheid.
Yeah.
Leviathan wants white supremacy to win. Yeah. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow because it says, it's going to be ordered. And it's like, white supremacy isn't necessarily ordered because all the minorities are going to go through the same pain and anguish and problems that the homeless are going through in this sideline story. So how is that not chaotic?
Right.
If you say
it's doomed to fail. I mean, you can't,
right,
because the people are going to rise up, and the rest of the world won't stand for it either.
so it'll just cause more chaos as well. So I don't see how that kind of helped. I don't know. It's maybe because people tend to think of like more right-wing fascist regimes of like the apartheid and stuff like that as being more ordered. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
I think it's only in the short term. It's like that idea that if you squeeze your fist really tight, then the stuff slips out of your hands.
Right. Right. So this story had some cool art, and Leo Shable's story arc is a little contrived, but face fails, and in good face fashion, he's just more about the show than the actual task at hand.
Yeah, and he doesn't seem to mind. I mean, he gets in trouble with Leviathan, but getting whipped by her, or like getting chained up by Pinhead or whatever, it doesn't really seem to bother the other Cenobites that much. This is like, well, this is the world we live in.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah. Next up is The Devil's Brigade Part 14, and this is a story written by Nicholas Vince, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Echoes, Dreams, and Revelations. So written by Nicholas Vince, and artist is Andrew Paquette.
Cool artwork. It's done in a kind of woodcut style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. This is another complicated story, to say the least.
I have a hard time with particularly the sudden change in character of this Father Abaddon.
I think this story would have worked better as a written story with more space to develop, or more pages for the story to actually, get explained a little better. But Father Abaddon is still under Balbrith's control. He still has his TV show. He's the counterpoint to Samuel's great Inquisitor style, right? He represents a church that's inclusive and progressive and wants to create the kingdom of heaven on earth instead of the warning and accusing the sinners of the fires of hell like Samuel does, right? And Balbrith consults at one point with Flagellum, and so she's told that, well, Face failed, so you mustn't fail, because we have to the time of configuration is at hand, and we have to come up on top. So Balbrith is preparing to remove Samuel from the board, and she does this by actually shoving him from the top of his cathedral and kills Samuel. In the meantime, Abaddon dreams of Samuel's death just before the call comes with the news, and this kind of consolidates his belief that he's somehow a prophet. Still, the dreams of excommunication that he has, like the one that opens the story, continue to sow doubts on what he's doing. He feels that maybe he keeps getting told in the dreams that what he's doing is not what the church wants, that he has to stick to the more old-fashioned kind of thing. And so after Samuel dies, I think he feels that he needs to continue Samuel's work. And so he becomes radicalized in a way that, like you said, Ryan, seems a little contrived. He's
just one way for a short, for his whole life, and then a switch just flips, and now all of a sudden he's like, let's kill all the non-believers.
Yeah, like the sinners must be rooted out and be consigned to the flames of hell. He just becomes Samuel. Whereas at this point, he was doing a really good job at fighting Samuel's rhetoric by saying that, stuff. At one point, he's on TV talking to Samuel, and he says something like that he wants women to return to the church. He kind of confronts Samuel by saying that Paul said it's shameful for a woman to speak in church, and then Father Abaddon tells Samuel, yet Paul speaks of Junia, who was of note among the apostles, and he talks about salvation, because Samuel doesn't talk about salvation; he just talks about a sin and damnation, and he says, well, I think people can be saved and construct the kingdom of heaven on earth instead of just worrying about whether or not they're going to go into hell after they die. And then, like you said, he just kind of flips a little bit at the end, and just after Samuel dies, he just becomes like Samuel.
Yep. Yeah, sorry. Joey just woke up.
Okay.
But yeah, I had a hard time with that transition, and I just felt like, I don't know, this was another one of those stories that it's like, well, it's time for it to end now, so we got to do something.
Yeah, I think it needed more time, maybe a couple more chapters showing how maybe Father Abaddon would, start becoming a little more. Maybe something could have happened. Something could happen to him that would put him more on that track of thinking that, okay, maybe we shouldn't be so progressive. I don't know exactly what could have happened to tell him that, but I thought when Rebecca cuts his face, that could have been a catalyst for that. And speaking of Rebecca, the story ends with Rebecca and David, like the two former Father Samuel cultists. They were put in an asylum after Rebecca attacked and accidentally cut Abaddon's face. So there's one moment when David is attacked by an Abaddon groupie, I guess, when he says that you have to be good gardeners, you have to root out the sinners. And then, it's a simple-minded guy in the mental institution, and he kind of doesn't like it when David questions that, and he kind of grabs him by the neck and says, well, I'll be a good gardener and I'll root out the sinner. And so in the middle of the chaos of this attack, Rebecca escapes, and somehow she finds herself right in front of the house of Father Jenner, who was Abaddon's teacher. And he brings her in and he tells her he fears a new Inquisition is coming, and he doesn't understand why Father Abaddon changed his mind so quickly. And he tells Rebecca that they have to go out and preach the truth, because only the truth will let them win. So that's it.
Yeah. And it was like, how is one of those order and the other one is chaos? I have no idea.
Yeah, like the Inquisition seems to be a terrible, terrible way to impose order, because it causes a lot of chaos as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you get people fighting people, you got people excommunicating other people, and just conflict. It just breeds conflict. Whenever zealots take over, the world doesn't become a more ordered place. It becomes a place of conflict and chaos.
Exactly like the first Inquisition.
Yeah, right?
In real life.
Yeah. I mean, look at what happened. It wasn't the Inquisition, but look at what happened in Salem, Massachusetts, when zealots took over and people started accusing other people of being witches. Even a couple of cats got burned at the stake for being witches. I mean, how crazy is that?
Yeah. I mean, they killed a lot of cats during that period of time, didn't they? That's awful.
I have a black cat, by the way, so.
Yeah, I know.
They're like, witch.
Yeah, right. If you get bad luck every day.
No, only when she pukes in my shoe.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
It's the only thing. Otherwise, I feel like I got a lot of good luck for having a black cat.
Yeah,
definitely.
And so then the next, let's see, book 15 is the next one. And that's got a big old picture of Atkins on the cover.
Yeah, it's a cover art by John Rome, who also did more stories in the comic books. So, and I just want to say, in regards to the previous one, that at the end, at the closing end of the book, there's a quote from Clive Barker about the Devil's Brigade. He says, "Thus far, in the stories that spring from the mythology of Hellraiser, the actions of the forces of damnation have gone unchallenged. Time after time, the Cenobites have claimed souls for their infernal chambers, and there has been little or nothing that mortal man could do to stop them. Nor has there been any sign of heavenly intervention to set against the horrors that Pinhead and the rest of his crew readily dredge up from the depths. This situation is about to change." So that's a hint of what the conclusion of Devil's Brigade.
Yeah.
The horrors.
And I think that's an excerpt from the introduction to the next issue, book 16, right?
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so in issue 15, you have, in the foreword, I mean, Dan Chichester has been talking about fan mail in the openings of these things, right? In the forewords.
Yeah.
So in this one, he reads some more fan mail, kind of summarizes the issue stories that we're about to read as usual. But I thought that was interesting that this comic book never got something like a breeding grounds or anything like that, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, even when they do answer people's letters, it's like they answer 2 of them, and they're not like, you know, they don't really give us good answers about, you know, things, what's to come, or it's kind of
what were kind of pointless.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we love Hellraiser. It's, you know, it's my weekly dose of pain or whatever. And
right. Well, they tease some of the stuff that's about to come, like Harrowers or a Weave World comic book and stuff like that, I think.
Yeah, but not from those particular letters. I mean, I don't think.
And the summer special.
Yeah.
Right. No, not
cool
the
if they would do like summer, like, you know, letters. I remember reading a lot of Dark Horse, you know, comics, and they would have like at the end, it'd always have that part where it'd be like for, you know, fan letters, you know, and like, you know, answering questions from the fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this issue 15 opens with a pinup playing card that I thought is really cool by Ovi Hondru. That's the artist's name, and it's a playing card with Cheddar and Pinhead. Yeah. I would love a deck of cards made in this way. I mean, do you guys remember some time ago there was a Clive Barker tarot card deck, right?
Yeah.
Did you get to look at those cards?
Only in their cellophane. I never got to open one because we sold them in our Kickstarter.
Right.
But I didn't want.
I'm sorry I missed out on that one. But at the time, you know, we were still kind of unemployed here, so I was kind of cutting expenses. But maybe those will end up on eBay one day.
Yeah, that would be cool. But yeah, and Pinhead's holding a mace, and like Chatter has like a butcher knife or a meat cleaver. Yeah,
meat cleaver. So that's cool. There's another tarot card at the end of this comic book that's got Butterball and female Cenobite.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was cool.
So the first story, I kind of teased it last night, right? I put a panel of the ending of the story, and I said, what is this panel about? Well, you can find out by listening to our upcoming episode.
Yeah.
That was kind of a good segue into leading listeners into it. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. It's called Of Love, Cats, and Curiosity, which was... this was James Moore was the writer, and Richard Villagran was the artist.
I think Ricardo Villagran,
Ricardo.
He did some other stories in previous issues, right? I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So it follows this old lady, who has
Alma.
Yeah, she's a cat lady, I guess.
Yeah, Alma Pritchard talking to her cat, and heck of an opening. She admits to killing her neighbor in a diary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like her husband, George, once opened the lament configuration box 40 years ago, and he was taken by the Cenobites. So she became a widower and just turned to caring for her cats. But turns out her neighbor is a sadistic cat killer. Yeah. So you can see where the story is going with this, right?
Yes. Except that they skip over that part. Well, you know, that's the thing that was like mystifying to me, because they... She gets the box down from the attic or wherever she was just keeping it, you know, after her husband dies, and it's just implied that she gives it to the neighbor, but we don't actually see it, right?
It's off camera, but okay. So what happens is she finds out that her neighbor killed her cat Alice, right?
Yeah.
And so one night she still has the box that her husband disappeared after opening, so she's kind of handling the box, trying to summon the Cenobites to get revenge, and she drops a glass and cuts her hand. So she ends up bleeding on the box, and this summons the Cenobites.
Yeah.
So they show up and said, "Oh, come, Alma, it's time for us to go teach you the ways of." And she said, "Wait, let me make a deal with you guys. Like my neighbor sent me pictures of himself like torturing my cat Alice, which seems like a no-brainer that she would just take these things to the police."
I know.
Right? Like the man next door, Thomas Merriweather. So he says, "This man is a horrible man. He tortures kitty cats. You should take him to hell." And the Cenobites are like, well, we're not your personal army here, so
we don't get revenge.
But do you want us to take this man in your place? What can we win from such a bargain? And she says, "Well, can I propose a bargain?" It's like, and she said, "Take this guy because he enjoys sculpting flesh, and I'll even help you take him, but just give me some time." And he says, "Well, we give you 1 month, 1 moon cycle."
Yeah.
And then we'll come back and take you, you know. And so she puts the She puts the box on her neighbor's door, and of course he can't resist it, and is taken. And this all happens off camera, like you said, Ryan. Except in the beginning, we see a panel of the cat flashback to the cat seeing the guy get taken by the Cenobites. You just see the glint off his eye and the blood spraying over the cat. And her cat Sebastian is basically the audience's point of view in this whole story.
Which I like the way that was how they told that story, the point of view from the cat. That was cool.
Yeah. So Alma gets a month to think about what she done and write on her diary, and said, I got myself a ticket to hell, but at least I got that son of a bitch who is never going to kill another innocent animal.
Yeah.
And so the Cenobites show up after a month and they take her. And her little kitty cat Sebastian is the only one who sees everything. And you get his sad face at the end in the last panel.
That real sad face. It's like, man.
Cat face, like, oh. Yeah, so who's going to take care of the cat? I guess nobody.
Oh, the front door neighbors were taking care of the cat. She says that at the beginning of the story. She says, "What are you doing here, Sebastian?
You need to go back to the neighbors."
Yeah. It's like, this is not they're going to come for me today. And that basically she's like expositioning the story to the cat, saying, the Cenobites are going to get me, so you better go and get your num-nums over at the neighbor.
Yeah.
But yeah, Black Kitty, poor Kitty, lost his mama.
Yeah.
That was an interesting story mechanism, having the audience see through the eyes of the cat. Interesting thing. I know Clive Barker at one point, I don't know if you guys remember this, but he was on Twitter. He mentioned he was writing a story called Grail, and that it was going to be, we're going to see the crucifixion of Jesus through the eyes of a dog.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Joseph of Arimathea's dog. And for those who don't know, Joseph of Arimathea was the guy who gave up his own tomb that was ready to go so Jesus could get buried. So yeah, but I don't know what's the status in that story, Grail. I mean, I can probably do some research about that, but maybe we'll never get to see that story. That's sad.
Probably not. So next we have the Devil's Brigade Part 15. The Cenobite always rings twice.
It's kind of another allusion to a movie title, right? The Postman Always Rings Twice.
Yeah.
And here again, I just cannot get past this, like, turning Pinhead into like a Mystique character from X-Men, where, he's like putting on somebody's skin and then becoming this woman and having this like sexual relationship with this guy, and it's just like he puts on somebody else's skin and takes on a completely different personality. And it just seems really far-fetched.
Yes, and at first... go ahead, Rob.
That goes against, for me, when I've never read the previous issues. Like I said, I'm kind of behind, but it says he's German, and, I'm thinking it's Elliot Spencer here. So when I said it says his name is Morris Dillard.
Oh, yeah, that's the doctor that he's pretending to be.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah, and it's Germany because that's where the World Health Organization is doing a conference about AIDS research in Frankfurt.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so that's Pinhead here he's pretending to be Dr. Morris Dillard, who's about to do a World Health Organization lecture in Frankfurt. So he's now in a relationship with Dr. Jelly, I think that was the name of her, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So, but there's another doctor here. His name is Dr. Roger Burnich, and he's accusing Jelly of plagiarism. He's that doctor who didn't like the fact that Dr. Jelly had so much access to computer time to run her simulations, I think.
Oh, is he the same guy? I couldn't tell because the art is different.
Oh, maybe he's not the same guy, because the other guy is the guy who got AIDS, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the same.
This is a guy accusing her of stealing all of his work, which I don't remember that ever being an issue before.
Right, me neither. But so he accuses Jelly of plagiarism to a woman called Lori who works for the conference, and so both papers are pulled for board review. And then Lori and Burnich, who were in a relationship previously, he keeps asking her, like, well, we used to be in a relationship for 5 years ago, so I hope you're going to put a good word to the World Health Organization on my behalf. And she's like, well, I can't play favorites. And that's when Pinhead needs Jelly to follow through in her research, because she's working to find an AIDS vaccine, right?
Yeah.
And so he goes to talk to Lori dressed up as Dr. Morris Dillard, he kills her at a gym. It's like a weird kill scene, right?
Yeah.
Like she's bench pressing or something, or she's doing like lifting weights, and he shows up and he says, "Oh, let me help you with that. I'll spot you." And then he puts all this weight. Yeah, puts all this weight on it. It's just like, "Oh, that's too much weight." It's like, it feels like you're holding 90% of the weight, and it's like, "Well, not anymore." And he drops it on her and kills her.
Yeah.
It's like one of the weirdest kill scenes that Pinhead ever did.
Yeah.
And then he wears her skin.
This is the lady working for the conference.
Yeah, and then he wears her skin to go see Burnich. And so she kind of puts the idea in him that, yeah, that other woman, you should have words with her and, put her in her place. And so Burnich goes and stalks and attacks Jelly in the street and takes her research. And then Pinhead, masked as Laurie, makes love to Dr. Burnich on those research papers on the bed.
Yeah.
Which
really,
is kind of
really
weird.
Weird, yeah.
Afterwards, Pinhead takes his skin off and leaves it behind on the bed, leaving Burnich to wake up and find that mess, and he kind of has a mental breakdown. It's like, he like holds like his lover's skin, is like, what happened here? And he kind of has a breakdown. And the aftermath of that is that Burnich is taken by the police. He's accused of murder, and he's now out of the way of Dr. Jelly, even if a research for a vaccine is still halted, right? I mean, the conference, the board review decides that we don't like the direction you guys are going. It doesn't seem like this is a good direction. Maybe it's not ethical. Maybe they think it's something wrong with the line of research. And so they said, no, we don't want you to do a vaccine based on this research. But then Pinhead, as Dillard, tells her that to save lives, well, this is about saving lives. So she must ignore the bureaucracy and move forward with her idea of a vaccine. And of course, this is going to end in the next part. It's gonna end in a pretty chaotic way. But
yeah, so this is another one of those where it's like the definitions of chaos and order are it seems like, how is an AIDS vaccine helping with order? They say that AIDS virus or HIV is chaotic. I mean, I guess sort of. I don't know.
They never really explain that, do they?
Yeah.
No.
I think it's more about the puzzle of it. I think there was a mention of like the puzzle of finding the solution, right? On the first part where they were talking about computer simulations.
Yeah. And
on the first part of the story.
I could get behind a little more, but this, the idea that if we have the cure, then order will be restored.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's more about solving that puzzle. But they kind of got lost a little bit in the story, I think.
I did like the part where Pinhead did rip off the skin. The woman, and because when the guy wakes up, it looks like it reminded me of Julia's skin he's holding.
Yeah.
If you look at it, it kind of reminded me of like Julia's skin a little bit.
Yeah. I can't get over how Dr. Burnich reminds me of Jeff Sessions. Sorry, I just had to say that because all these like illustrations.
He really does.
He just looks like the Attorney General. But yeah, so it seems like Pinhead is going to push for the AIDS vaccine to be done even without the World Health Organization allowing her to continue. So that's where it's going. But yeah, Pinhead shape-shifting and putting on someone's skin. I like the idea of putting someone's skin because that's what Frank does with his brother's skin, right?
Yeah.
In Hellraiser. But it seems like it actually alters their physiology as well. And
doing that to putting on somebody's skin to seduce them just doesn't really seem like his wheelhouse.
Right. Some cool pin-ups before and after the story. One of them looks like the cover for a heavy metal band t-shirt. And then there's another one where we see this tortured lady soul in hell being held together by what looked to be like roots or tentacles, right?
Yeah. Like a tree or something.
Yes, like a hellish tree and like a Dante's Inferno thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then so then we go on to the Devil's Brigade Part 16, the Kold Red, and Kold is spelled with a K for some reason. Like Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat!
Insert coins.
Oh, yeah, God. So many coins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dollars and dollars. Anyway,
Coins
so
are
this
spelled with a K.
Yeah. So the story opens with DA Assistant Matthew Day, Chief of Police Louis DeCinza, and DA Vanessa Albert talking to Mayor His Honor Meade. And I guess these are all weird names.
Yeah, I know.
And so they're concerned about that PR cop team duo, like the dynamic duo of Lester George and Jillian Elliott. So I don't really understand how that cop team would be like a sort of a PR thing. It seems like it's a PR nightmare because they've been taking credit for all these massacres that have happened with like drug gangs and stuff like that.
Right. And on the surface, it's supposed to be like they're cleaning up the street, but in reality, they're just, they're perpetuating these massacres. Well, they're not, but that's what everybody believes.
And they're concerned here at the opening because there's been no arrests. There's just been massacres. And like police brutality doesn't even begin to cover what's going on here. And people are getting angry at us. And the mayor doesn't like it. They're loose cannons. We're going to take their badges.
Yeah.
And so, so the DA assistant, I'm going to call him Day, he says, let me handle this. So he's the one who's been in touch with Atkins.
Yeah.
And weird. He's been like in touch with Atkins through the help of this psychic.
Kind of witch. Yeah, psychic.
Well, the DA talks to Atkins, and then the psychic talks to Atkins, and the psychic talks to the woman cop, and the DA talks to the man cop.
That seems like a good chain of command right there.
I know, it's like
not chaotic at all. So it's Madame Mamiche. And
Madame
so we cut to Atkins being punished by Pinhead. And like you said, Ryan, he's like covered in hooks and being chained and hung up. And it still doesn't seem like that really upsets him. And, so he's Pinhead is telling him, you're getting this situation out of control. This is your warning. And, don't compromise your duty. And Atkins is like, compromise this, you piece of shit.
I thought that was funny.
Even though he's not really doing anything when he says that.
I mean, at least his character is consistently disrespectful.
Offensive?
Yeah,
disrespectful. So, so meanwhile, Jillian and Lester are doing a beat patrol. And I guess one kid throws a can at the patrol car. Yeah. So Jillian jumps out and points the gun at the youth, calls him scum, and tells him he's under arrest, which kind of starts a mob gathering around them.
And she goes on and on about how she's like, this is her destiny, or her chosen duty, or I forget what she says, but it's like, like it's really important for her to kill everybody that bugs her.
Yeah, and so like we've seen in previous chapters that she's very trigger happy, and there's one time when there was they go to this massacre that happened with Atkins, and one of the guys was still alive, and she kind of just points her gun at him and shoots him executioner style, which kind of freaks out the other cop, and he doesn't like what's going on because Black Lives Matter, and so anyway. So this really touches on those lines of police brutality and how black people are targeted unfairly by police, and so all this stuff. Meanwhile, Matthew Day has an idea. He suggests to the mayor that they should do a press conference in the middle of North Philly to say that the gang situation is under control. What could go wrong, right?
Yeah, right.
What could go wrong? And so the power vacuum from the latest Atkins massacre is starting to cause a gang war because now people are trying to take power. And so they're like, we're going to take it to the streets. And, so the gangs decide to meet in the streets. And, of course, they're going to meet exactly where the press conference is going to take place. In the meantime, the two cops, they're confronting each other. So she's pointing her gun at a young black guy, and the other black cop says, you can't do that. And she's like, they argue. So eventually Lester kills Jillian, which causes a riot on its own. And the riot is like, all right, let's go. There's a press conference happening in North Philly. Let's go there and make a riot. Yeah. So it all converges at the event.
Yeah.
And then
Atkins shows up and
he goes nuts. He kills the mayor.
Heck of a story there. Yeah, that's a heck of an ending there. Atkins shows up, shoots everyone, gang members and mayor and his aides.
Yeah.
Atkins is immediately chained taken back to hell, and Pinhead just show up momentarily and kind of looks at Day and kind of puts his finger up to his lips saying, shh, don't tell anybody. And then, disappears. Yeah. And I'm like, this happened at a press conference. How are people not freaking the fuck out?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, what's going on? Like, so there's a weird guy with like machine guns, shows up, kills everybody, then disappears in a fizz of smoke. And what?
Yeah.
And people seem to be taking it in stride. They're like, turned to the DA assistant and said, well, everybody else is dead in the line of command. I guess
you're the new.
Yeah.
And he offers the psychic lady a cabinet position.
Yeah. He said, well, I guess you're the interim mayor now. I was like, all right. Yeah. I'm going to hire a witch for my cabinet.
Let's see how they're going to cover all that up.
No. So that was strange thing. I mean, I could see the whole thing converging onto the press conference, but I wish the ending had been a little different than just Atkins showing up in the middle of this and just shooting everybody.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like he didn't even try, right? I mean, Pinhead tells him, you better fix this. You're not doing it right. It's getting too chaotic. You got to bring order back. And he just goes nuts and does whatever he wants, and he doesn't even make an effort.
It's just like Face. I mean, Face does kind of the same thing before. Yeah. None of the people they picked to do their things, they chose the worst people to do.
Boy howdy, did Leviathan mess up on picking the people to do this, right?
Yeah.
Except for Abigor, apparently she did a good job.
And Balberith.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean that the ending, I think that this could have been different. Like maybe Lester could have had a bigger role at the ending. Maybe he could have shown up and try to calm people down and admit that he killed his partner, but confess to what was going on with Atkins or something like that. Maybe that could have brought down the mayor and his cabinet. But then again, I don't know where the story would go after that. So yeah, that's the end of Devil's Brigade, the Cold Red.
Yeah, and brings us into book 16, the last one for this episode.
Yes.
What is that guy on the cover?
Griot or Griot? I don't know. He's the librarian of hell, I think. Well, no, that's Balberith. He's more like part of this group of creatures in hell, a long line of descending creatures that their job is to tattoo the history of hell onto their own skin.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so for that, they have to be these really enormous, voluminous, fat people, right? So they have enough room on their body to tattoo all these events and all these like symbols and stuff.
And this one, there's a weird pinup of a Cenobite with like a bunch of hooks on his hands.
Oh yeah. It's a pinup by an artist named Christian. It kind of looks more like an alien, like something.
Yeah, it does. It's got a very alien kind of.
Yeah, alien look, like something you would see in the pages of Heavy Metal magazine or something like that.
Yeah, right.
So the foreword is where Dan Chichester talks about that Devil's Brigade 18-part story epic, and that people describe it as pointless, interconnected, disjointed, unifying, out of control. I agree.
Yeah.
Malcolm Smith pens a story in this issue, right? Called This I Saw.
Right. Or is that? I thought he was doing the Harrowers.
I think so. I think he does that too, right? But he also does this story.
Yes, the one that with the boy going through a rite of passage.
Mm-hmm.
The tribe.
Did I miss? Oh yeah,
there's one story.
I didn't put that in the notes. I don't remember reading that story. We'll have to go back.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Huh? Yeah, I think for some reason that's okay. I guess.
Anyway, so Malcolm Smith, for those who remember his name, is the guy who plays Ashbury in Nightbreed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, he was in a relationship with Clive Barker. And he also worked in the comic books for a while.
Yeah.
I think now he's a homeopath or something, naturist.
In
I looked at
Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, I watched some of the videos on his site.
Uh-huh. I think homeopathy is quack. And he talks about morphogenetic fields, biophotons, and uses the word quantum a lot. So his website also sells these items that you wave around your food and drink to charge them with something.
Yeah.
So not my thing.
Yeah,
but,
no, not either. But he was talking, one of the videos, he was talking about, well, I don't want to, if he has his opinion or whatever, but talking about how marijuana affects you in negative ways. And, it sounded like he was just misinformed.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And the funny thing, I just want to say this about homeopathy, is that the funny thing about homeopathy that makes zero sense is that it's based on the theory that if you dilute something really, really dilute it a lot, it makes it stronger. Which, of course, I'm a chemical engineer. I have a master's in chemical engineering and biochemistry. And I can assure you that does the exact opposite. When your dilution ratio is the same as putting like an aspirin tablet into a lake and then taking a dropper and getting a few drops of that onto a glass and drink it, that doesn't mean that it's making the aspirin any stronger. Okay?
Yeah,
it doesn't. That's homeopathy is absolutely, it's quackery. Okay? I mean, I don't know why supermarkets still have that sort of thing, and it's like, okay, and in England it's still kind of big because I think the royal family kind of supported homeopathy for a while, so that kind of gave it a foothold. But it's like, that's not true. It's like, that's based on the principle that if you're sick and you got a runny nose, well, you get a runny nose when you have spicy food because of the capsaicin or something makes your nose runny. Well, maybe if you put extremely diluted capsaicin tablets and you take those when you got a cold, it will make your nose stop running, which makes zero sense to me. Okay, so that's homeopathy. Anyway, so the first story is Devil's Brigade Part 17, and what's it called?
Fury.
Hell hath no fury, which is from the old saying, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned."
Like a woman scorned, yeah.
Yeah. So what's this about? I think it's Dr. Jelly creates an unapproved vaccine and tries it out with her friend that has AIDS, and then ships it out anyway, despite the fact that it could actually make AIDS patients better at first, but later kills them in a horrible fashion. So I think chaos is victorious for this one. Good artwork in this one.
Yeah, the water kind of watercolors.
Yeah. Gaspar is the artist, and the writer is Gil Ashby. So
it's really disturbing, the artwork for like the man that was had AIDS, because it was very realistic looking.
Yeah, and it talks about some problems that people went through, like the co-op board wanted to throw them out of their apartment, and the insurance company wasn't going to pay for their treatment. So you got to remember, this is 1992, so this is back when the early stages of AIDS, and how it was being tackled by government and health institutions and stuff. And I remember there was one. What was that line that was given? This wasn't 1992. We were what, Clinton era?
Yeah. Was it?
Yes.
Okay. So there was a line that was given to. Let me see. There was a. Dang it. It was an instruction that someone gave to the health department during the beginning of AIDS. I think this was during the Reagan administration, and this later came out, and it was like the letter said something like, look pretty but do as little as possible about the AIDS epidemic, which ended up the way we know now. So that actually kind of leaked out. Anyway, so people were still very uninformed about what HIV positive meant, what AIDS meant. So she tries this vaccine right on this guy, and at first he gets better.
Yeah.
But clearly there was something wrong with the research, and she didn't want to listen to it, and Pinhead kind of convinced her that, no, we should do this because we can save lots of people, and that's what matters at the end. And there's a reason why science self-corrects itself. You can't just try things on humans, and that's not ethical.
Yeah.
No. Well, what happens to this guy is he like kind of looks like he melts or something like that, or just like his body just starts to disintegrate.
Hemorrhages, right?
Yeah.
It's like he's got Ebola or something.
Like in How Spoilers Bleed.
Good one. Yeah. So at the end it says Pinhead is just looking at this from afar and he sees like that he failed, or did he? And it says budget slashed while homophobia, racism, and death tolls all rise. A numbing sense of something precious, irreplaceably lost. Chaos victorious. So it looks like Pinhead failed in his task.
Yeah,
right?
That's 3 out of 5 failed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all going to come together at the end. And the second story, I really like the artwork.
This is the.
This I saw.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I do too. That's really good. And for some reason, when I read, it was like 1:00 in the morning when I was finishing up, and for some reason, somehow I skipped over this one.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Okay. So the story is that this native called Little Moon, he's going to go through the journey of change. And so, I mean, the drug rituals of manhood aren't rare. I mean, you can find lots of those in tribes around the world. Like one of them that kind of sounds like this one is called the Algonquin drug trip. And so basically what happens is that the boys of the Algonquin Indian tribe of Quebec are brought to a secluded area, often caged, and then they're given an intoxicating medicine known as wisokan. So this stuff contains an extract of a plant called datura. I think the scientific name is Datura stramonium, and it's a very, very dangerous hallucinogen. That is, they say it's about 100 times more powerful than LSD. So that's got to be pretty
serious shit.
Yeah. So they spend about 3 weeks in this like kind of weird state that can include racing heartbeat, amnesia, and hypothermia. And so it's kind of meant to take the child out of the man's body. But we don't know what really long-term effects this has. But it's a weird ritual of passage, and it's based on taking drugs. Mm-hmm. And there's other rituals like that. I mean, in Africa, people take this hallucinogen called ibogaine that comes from a plant. And, there's other rituals that don't really imply taking drugs, but they imply getting like tattoos all over your body or get some sort of mutilation done to your back. Like the crocodile man of Africa, they get this, these scar tissue things made on their backs to look like crocodile skin. And basically it's just done by making deep gashes on their backs and then scrubbing like ash on their back and letting it infibulate and infect and then become scarred. And so there's a lot of weird rituals that mankind has in becoming adults. So I guess this is one of those where Little Moon takes this. He's supposed to throw a spear, right? He's blindfolded, throws a spear in a different direction, and then he has to walk through that direction for like 2 days. And then he has to take the drug of change, go through the ritual, and then return as a man. And so what happens in this one is that he hallucinates about Leviathan, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, crazy.
And Leviathan and the harrowers, like you were saying.
Yeah,
right?
the horrors. Yeah, the harrowers.
Yeah. So, I guess you didn't read this one. So right. So what he sees is this situation where Morty Mom has been defeated by Leviathan and she's being stuck into the ground, which kind of reminded me a little bit like in Imagica, where this bound woman, Celestine, was stuck in the kind of behind a wall, left there to be forgotten. In this one, Mortemame is being put into a vortex between hell and earth, where she has no power. And the harrowers are present, and so there are these Cenobite tribal warriors that tell them, if you want to save your goddess, then you have to go into this you have to solve this puzzle inside this structure, and you'll get trapped inside. And all you got to see inside to solve the puzzle is this lantern, and this lantern runs on human flesh. So you have to feed it flesh to have light.
And they're cutting off parts of their bodies, like fingers and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so they get stuck in there. They want to rescue Mortemame, but the lantern starts going out. Uh-oh, time to cut off something. And eventually they end up cutting their hands, their feet, and they finally discover that there's a second layer to the puzzle. And the second layer to the puzzle to escape that and to take Morte Mame out of her prison, guess what? It involved having hands and feet. So they were tricked. And so that's what Little Moon hallucinates, and he goes back, tells his tribe about it, and they go to the place where he saw this happen, and they create this marker over the Harrower's grave. So I don't know if this is the first time that the Harrowers are mentioned, because it seems like it's more of a Malcolm Smith thing, Malcolm Smith / Clive Barker thing.
I just figured out what I did. I read the wrong issue.
Oh, you read 17?
Yeah, I did. And so now that's starting to make sense, about this story where they find all the bodies around the Morte Mame's table that have their hands and feet missing.
Oh, I see. Okay. So what happens here is that the shaman at the end says that we'll keep the story of the Harrowers alive, and one day other 6 people will come to wage war on the god of many points, which is Leviathan, because he's like a diamond-shaped guy. So the god of many points. So interesting that the Indians would be more in touch with the earth, as the Hopi tribes and stuff like that. They talk about the sanctity of earth and Mother Earth and stuff like that. So I guess they would be more akin to knowing about the story of Morte Mame, because she's kind of like a Gaia-like deity, right? Yeah. So. And the third story.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and the third story, it's the finale.
Reckoning.
So did you read this one?
I did. Yeah.
Reckoning?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay, because this brings everything together. So I guess that's why you were that's why you were kind of feeling like the story didn't really make sense to you, because you're missing the ending.
So sucks. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I'll take the blame for that.
No, that's fine. So in this one, we see Griot, and Griot is Hell's chronicler, I guess.
Yeah.
So Praetor Abatur, right? He's the guy who was talking about the time of configuration when this all started, I think. He's like this, like judge in Hell, I would call him that. Okay. And so he shows up at Griot's chamber, and he summons him to witness the trial of the Vasa Iniquitatis, because their task of serving Leviathan in the time of configuration is completed, and so it's time to judge, check the scales and see which side won.
Oh, that's cool. There's little panels showing like the Dr. Chenard, and there's one with Alastor and Shopless.
Kirsty and Frank.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So he marks his tattoos to chronicle the events that happen in Hell, throughout its history. And so he gets up and is like, okay, time to go and get my tattoo needles. And so he shows up in the court and the trial thing. And so we see Abigor, Face, Balberith, Atkins, and strangely enough, Pinhead is missing, right?
Yeah.
And Abatur is saying that you have failed us. You've undermined our failure, the task at hand. And, so he's saying, well, you've done well, Abigor, and Balberith, you've done well too. But, these other guys, they didn't do well. And Pinhead failed, and he's not even here. So it's all his fault. It's all Pinhead's fault. And so he orders Griot to tattoo himself to tattoo himself with the failure of Pinhead. But Griot doesn't do that, right? He tattoos like what could have been, what the success. He tattoos that Pinhead saved the situation, because he tattoos Dr. Jelly with a formula of proteins and enzymes, and she's holding in her hand the vaccine for. Well, actually, that's a little doll of Pinhead that she's holding. So anyway. So it's a mark of faith that he believes that Pinhead did the right thing, and he actually succeeded in his task. And so Abatur is not happy with that, because he ordered Griot to tattoo about Pinhead's failure. So he says, "You're committing perjury. That's not what I told you to do. Pinhead failed, and you've been guilty of perjury. So sentence is death."
Yes. They cut him up, chop him up.
they're cutting up Griot, and there's like, no, you're giving out to the chaos. You're giving into the chaos. This is not what you should do. And then, but then, while he's being rended into pieces, Pinhead appears, and he says, "Order in the court," and he slams his head on the pulpit. Oh, wow. So, and he lets them all know that he didn't fail, because he left Dr. Jelly with a combination of proteins and enzymes that will eventually result in a cure. So order is satisfied. And he says to Abatur, "You're not fit to judge my sins." And he just chains him and takes him away. And it says that Griot had faith in me. See, he raises up the piece of skin with the tattoo and says, Griot had faith. He's the one we should be aspiring to. He's a man of faith. And so everything is quiet. The basilisks under Leviathan that were tearing each other to pieces are quieted down. They're going back to dancing in the spiral around each other, which represents order. I forgot the names of them. They were Kidna and Charybdis or something.
Yes.
Yeah. And so Flagellum can finally go to sleep, and Leviathan satisfied, and it ends with a pretty cool shot. A Pinhead adjusting his pins, right?
Yeah.
It's like he's twisting his mustache, but he's actually just twirling a little pin there.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's cool. I'm gonna have to go back and read that issue. I can't believe I read the wrong one, but I was very tired.
I kind of spoiled it for you a bit, but
no, it's okay. It's for the episode, so.
So yeah, I guess I can see that Pinhead didn't fail, even though the other story kind of leaves you thinking that he failed.
Yeah.
But I guess it's, of course, Pinhead can't fail, right?
I'm gonna have to adjust my my opinion of the Devil's Brigade now that I know I missed a whole two parts to it.
Pinhead is like the dark version of the Pope, so he's infallible, just like the Pope, and
he's got he's not ever revealing his true hand.
Yes, that's a great. That's exactly what he did. Yeah,
as a card player,
Mm-hmm. So that was issue 16, and now I think they're done with the Devil's Brigade, and I think this is where they're going to start another several-part story with the Harrowers.
Yeah, right. And I know I really liked the first part, having read ahead by accident. But yeah,
well, there you go.
Awesome.
So that was Marvel Hellraiser Part 5, and we've completed Devil's Brigade. Stay tuned for more stuff.
And this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end. Find the show notes for this episode and join the discussion over at www.clivebarkercast.com, where we have news and links to all the ways you can connect with us. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and every other place you can find podcasts. The Clive Barker Podcast is an independent editorial podcast and news blog that is not affiliated with or under contract by Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans.
Thanks for listening.